These are some of the best running backs to draft in fantasy football for 2025. They could shatter your fantasy football league, and I'm going to give you pretty good explanation because as you can see by this graphic right here, the difference between Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley in weeks 10 through 17 was not really that much at all. Let me just compare this for you to start this argument off, and I'll tell you why Josh Jacobs is a fantastic value in fantasy football. In weeks 10 through 17, running back 2 was Josh Jacobs. The running back 1 was Saquon Barkley, right? When you look at these guys in their snaps, Saquon won things like snap share, rushing attempts, rushing yards, yards per carry, but Josh Jacobs actually led in like rushing attempts inside the 5, targets, receiving yards, total touchdowns, and so you look, these guys were separated from a points per game standpoint in these 7-week, 8-week stretch by less than a point. That is darn impressive. Josh Jacobs is set to dominate fantasy leagues again this year. In 2024, he was 6th in carries, and he was 5th in red zone touches, okay? When you're looking at his overall production, he finished with 1,300 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns, and he averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game across the entire season. That was 8th in the NFL. Now, you'll remember the beginning of the season, I think the first 7 weeks, he had 1 touchdown total. Josh Jacobs was not scoring touchdowns at the beginning of the season. He had a pretty slow start from a running back production standpoint with the Packers. And then in that last half of the season, he went absolutely off. And so you're talking about, the 17.2 fantasy points per game. I mean, that number could easily go up this year, and I will tell you why. The other thing, we talk about red zone touches. Really the two things that we look for in terms of, is a fantasy football asset, particularly a running back, going to have a high floor and high upside in fantasy football? We look at two things, touchdowns and receptions, right? For touchdowns, obviously he checks out, right? Again, 5th in red zone touches, so the opportunity is there, and he had 16 touchdowns last year. But let's talk about Josh Jacobs receiving a little bit. In terms of receiving, last year he didn't actually get any receiving volume, or very little. He was 35th in the league in routes run among running backs, so that's like, a running back, a backup running back in terms of routes run. 26th in targets. Yet despite that, he was 15th in receiving yards. He was 2nd in yards per route run. So on a per route run basis, he was the 2nd most efficient running back in the league in terms of receiving, and 3rd in yards per reception. So his efficiency metrics as a receiver really, really grayed out well here. And so, I think this tells me a couple things. I think it tells me that if they do decide to increase the receiving workload for Josh Jacobs this year, clearly he's doing very well with it. Clearly he's a very efficient pass catcher. They just have to utilize him a little bit more that way. Part of it is how the Packers offense is schemed up. But the Packers were 5th in the NFL in run plays per game last year. And so this is a team that likes to run the ball. We've seen this. We saw it when Aaron Jones was a Packer as well. They brought in Josh Jacobs, and really not anything changed. And again, when you're looking at the depth chart for the Green Bay Packers, this really does stand out as well because Josh Jacobs doesn't really have much competition for carries. I think his total his total opportunity share among his league mates or his teammates was like 66%. And so 2/3 of a backfield is a pretty good amount of work in an age where committee backfields are increasingly popular. So there's really not anybody else on the depth chart that's going to challenge Josh Jacobs. Vegas has his line for 2025 at like 1,050 yards, one of the higher lines when you look across running backs that's been posted. And so obviously Vegas expects a strong season from him. We're looking historically at the Packers, and they obviously run the ball a fair amount. Last year they had the 4th graded PFF run offense, and their overall offense was 10th in the NFL. And we talk about this a lot, but grabbing players that are on good offenses, that's important. The Packers are just a good offense where you're going to grab. Unfortunately, the receiver situation kind of sucks, but from a running back perspective, he's a good guy to grab because the Packers are a good offense, and they have an offensive-minded coach, and it clearly pays dividends in fantasy football. Right now, Josh Jacobs is going anywhere from the mid-second in our domain consensus ADP, which is a combination of multiple different platforms, to like the 2-3 turn on underdog. If you get Josh Jacobs in the 3rd, I mean, he's a league winner there, I think. I really do think so. Now, I think he's going in the 2nd more often than he's going in the 3rd. And, in the 2nd, I think he's a fairly safe pick. I think in the 2nd round, when you're talking about building your fantasy football draft, I think Jacobs is the perfect complement to, a wide receiver in the 1st round. Any of them. A Justin Jefferson, right? A CeeDee Lamb, a Malik Neighbors. Because, again, Josh Jacobs, the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, he was not only a running back 1, he was a top 2 running back. The 2nd best running back through the last 8 weeks of the season was Josh Jacobs, when he was actually scoring touchdowns. I expect him to score touchdowns this year. I expect the Packers to continue to focus on running the ball, and I expect Josh Jacobs to have a monster year. I think he could end up winning you fantasy leagues.
So, look, every time we talk about a rookie, a lot of people can be a little bit scared, I guess, to invest in one of those inexperienced guys that doesn't have experience at the NFL level. at such a high price. And for someone like Ashton Jeanty, who's going in the late first, early second round right now in your fantasy drafts, it can be a little bit daunting, especially when we just saw a couple years ago a guy like Bijan not really live up to the hype. But what I want to do before I even address that situation and that argument is let's talk about the actual situation that Jeanty's going into, because you're heading into an offense in Vegas where Pete Carroll is now the head coach there, and he's got a history of a lot of running back success, where he likes to run the ball heavily. He likes to do it consistently. I mean, you're looking at 2012 to 2015. That's 4 straight years where they ranked first, second, and third. Seattle did in total rushing attempts. And then you jump over to 2018 and 2019, second and third in total rushing attempts. So you've got 6 of the 13 seasons where Pete Carroll was a head coach for Seattle, where they were a top 3 rushing offense in terms of total rushing attempts. I mean, this season for Ashton Jeanty, the volume, I think, is without a question going to be some of the highest in the league, because Pete Carroll now has one of the most talented running backs in terms of a prospect that he's had really since Marshawn Lynch. I mean, you had some good years there with Chris Carson. You had a couple of seasons there where Kenneth Walker looked promising under Pete Carroll. But Ashton Jeanty is a whole nother level. I mean, Ashton Jeanty is the guy that really could get to a point where he's getting the volume that a Marshawn Lynch type of guy could, or type of running back could get. So then you look at the flip side, you're like, okay, he is still a rookie, and you want to give a little bit of a break to rookies and what their volume is going to look like, what their opportunity is going to look like, since they are kind of fresh out of college and don't have that experience. And we do honestly just have Bijan Robinson PTSD, right? So when you look back at that situation in Atlanta, you kind of had the same discussion, right? Where Atlanta was one of the top rushing offenses in the NFL. Arthur Smith was going to run the frick out of the ball. Let me say that again. Arthur Smith, we expected to give Bijan Robinson all the opportunities. Arthur Smith, right? Arthur Smith is one of the most unpopular offensive coordinators and head coaches when it comes to fantasy football specifically. He hates your fantasy football team almost as much, if not more, than Bill Belichick. So then you factor in Tyler Algier as well, which is that was the whole issue with Arthur Smith in Atlanta, is he was giving a ton of opportunity to Tyler Algier. There was almost an even split there for a good chunk of the season. And let's be honest, guys, the price was just too high for Bijan Robinson. I mean, don't even factor in the fact that Arthur Smith was calling the plays there. Bijan Robinson and his price, I mean, he was a top 6 pick in fantasy that season as a rookie. Top 6. The price is not nearly as high for a guy like Jeanty, where everybody's tempering their expectations for him. And he's going, I mean, late first round. We've seen him go early second in some underdog drafts as well. That price is way, way, way more palatable for a guy who really honestly has just as much upside and opportunity as a guy like Bijan did heading into his rookie season. And given the situation and how Pete Carroll likes to operate an offense, which isn't give the ball to the 4th guy on the depth chart like Zamir White and Dylan Laube, Ashton Jeanty is going to be swimming in opportunity and carries. I mean, you look at the depth chart here as well. There is no Tyler Algier to really worry about. I don't think there's going to be any surprises when it comes to the depth chart and anyone contending for rushing attempts in that offense with Ashton Jeanty. You have Jeanty, then you have Raheem Mostert, who's going to have the biggest, we'll see what he does. And then it's Sincere McCormick, Zamir White, Dylan Laube, and Chris Collier. There's no surprises here, guys. I think every single one of those guys has severe limitations. You know exactly what they are heading into this season, and Jeanty's going to get the bulk of those opportunities and the bulk of those carries without a question. And the price this time around is way, way, way more palatable. We need to stop comparing the Jeanty situation to Bijan Robinson a couple years ago as a rookie and legit start comparing it to Saquon Barkley as a rookie, because that's what it is.
Let's talk about Derrick Henry, and you might say, well, duh, he can win your fantasy. I mean, but actually, this needs to be said over and over and over again, because year after year after year, and eventually they'll be right. People short Derrick Henry because he's old, because of the age cliff, because of the carries, because he's worn down, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry just signed a 2-year, $30 million extension with the Ravens, coming off of one of his better years, in my opinion, of his late career here. Obviously, 1,900 yards last year. 1,921 yards was second in the NFL. 18 touchdowns was second in the NFL among running backs. 19.8 points per game, 4th in the NFL. Now, the disconnect between his points per game and his yards and touchdowns was, of course, the receiving usage, right? And he doesn't really have a ton of that. But it doesn't matter. It's never mattered with Derrick Henry. And the age also doesn't matter. Why would the Ravens give Derrick Henry a 2-year, $30 million extension if they thought, well, you know what? He's probably done. He's probably not going to. This is also Derrick Henry when you're looking at his games played. I mean, the last time he missed any time really was in 2021. He missed half the season that year. And before that, He's only played in single-digit games one time in his entire career. So he stays healthy. He's coming off a very good year. In fact, in terms of efficiency, 5.91 yards per carry last year for Derrick Henry, the most efficient year of his career, the second most touchdowns he scored in his career. And part of that is because he's playing on one of the best offenses of his career, and especially run-friendly offenses, because the Ravens had the first graded PFF run grade offense last year and the third overall PFF graded offense last year. And so he's playing in a fantastic situation, a situation that running backs literally would die for. And last year, he absolutely aided in the offense. You look at the Ravens again, second in opportunity as well, second in run plays per game are the Ravens, and Henry was second in the league in carries. And so he's absolutely, from an opportunity standpoint, getting every valuable touch. When you're looking at the depth chart there's nobody. Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, Rasheen Ali, there's a reason none of those guys are fantasy productive, because Derrick Henry is not only the red zone guy because he's 6'2", 250 pounds, but he's also the breakaway guy. He's also the between-the-20s guy. He's the everything guy. He's just simply one of the better running backs we've seen on the field in the last 20 years, and it shows in fantasy football. We're talking about his breakaway runs. He's first in breakaway runs among all running backs in the NFL. So he has the explosive capabilities. He's got the big play ability. He's fifth in yards created. He's second in true yards per carry. He's third in yards per touch. So a top 5 efficient back in the NFL to go with the top 2 production that he already has. He just got extended. They didn't bring anybody else in. Realistically, Derrick Henry could be going in the top 5, and I would be like, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. Yeah. And it may not be like, oh, this guy's going way below where his ADP is. Sure, there are some questions, and it's what pushes him down to about the 1-2 turn in fantasy football drafts. But he's definitely worth a pick there. And again, another good guy in our fantasy football draft strategy where we like to pair him with a wide receiver, I think. And so when you're looking at that, and again, the Vegas lines tell us the whole story here. Derrick Henry's at 1,325. That's his over-under for this year in terms of rushing yards. And so Vegas expects him to have a good year. He's on a new contract. The offense stayed mainly the same. They brought nobody in. I don't know anything else in terms of what we used to predict fantasy football seasons. I don't know if we could find anything else besides the age, besides turning back the clock, that would make us feel better about Derrick Henry for this year. He will win leagues. Again, you should absolutely not be scared to take him when you're drafting at the 1-2 turn in these drafts.
So I feel like the new cool thing to do right now is to fade Chuba Hubbard in 2025. And I think it's really interesting given what he was able to showcase and do last season, where he was given an opportunity to produce in a new offense, and he capitalized on that opportunity, really beat out Miles Sanders, honestly, and then was, basically kept Jonathan Brooks from getting any relevant opportunity while he was on the field for a short amount of time. When you're looking at Chuba, I mean, the money does matter here contractually. He's got almost $6 million of cap hit is for Chuba Hubbard this season, where the dead cap would be $10 million if they were to cut him. That changes and flips in 2026 after this year, where they would actually save $2 million if they were to cut him in 2026. Why does that matter? You essentially are going to be getting a lot of value out of Chuba Hubbard right now when he's going to remain on your team, and then you can do essentially whatever you want with him afterwards. So ultimately, what's going to be the point for Carolina to try and save him and keep him fresh and really let him split a ton of carries and opportunities with other guys in this room like Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne? When you're paying him, he produced last season, he was pretty efficient, and he was productive, and it looked pretty dang good. I mean, you're looking at what he did last season, 16.1 PPR points, that ranked 13th among running backs in the NFL. He was 4th in snap share, 8th in rushing attempts, 7th in rushing yards. Yards per carry, he wasn't efficient. He wasn't that great. Yes, he actually was. He was 17th among running backs in the league in yards per carry, 4.6 yards per carry, which is totally fine, totally solid. He had 3.6 targets per game. That was 13th among running backs and 11th, top 12 among running backs in the NFL in total yards. And the touchdowns, sustainable, 0.73 per game. He was 11th in total touchdowns last season. That's absolutely sustainable. The biggest question, the biggest worry you're going to have here is Rico Dowdle coming into town, because Rico Dowdle quietly last year actually had a ridiculous amount of touches and opportunities in a Dallas offense that was pretty lackluster in the rushing game, but they kind of had to run the ball, and he had a pretty good run towards the end of the season. He ended up averaging 12.5 points per game, which wasn't anything to write home about, but he was, in terms of yards per carry, he was okay. He was 4.4 yards per carry, which was a little bit less than what Chuba had last season, and then in terms of touchdowns, he was not getting a ton of red zone opportunities. So I think that's what I care about the most. Even though Rico Rico Dowdle was productive last season, admittedly, and had some good games in Dallas, you're looking at a situation where they couldn't really do anything else because they had a backup quarterback playing in that offense for half the season. All they were going to be able to do was slow the game down, run the ball, and hope that they could score 2 more points than their opponent in a low-scoring game. It didn't really work out, right? Because you need Dak Prescott apparently to win games. And with Rico, again, the lesser efficiency, the lesser opportunity in the red zone. He's not a red zone guy. He's not a guy that you're going to give goal line carries to, short yardage situations. That is literally like where Chuba made his money and got his opportunity, and why he sustained so much production last season consistently was those opportunities in the red zone and his receiving usage as well. I mean, he had 3.6 targets per game, so which was sniffing the top 12 among the league. So when you're looking at that situation, I mean, I'm looking at Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne really duking it out for the RB2 role in that offense. And you saw the RB2 role last season was getting anywhere from like 5 to 10 touches per game on the ground, and then maybe a couple of opportunities in the air. You see that across the league, right? And unless you're playing in an offense with Saquon Barkley where the RB2 isn't going to get any opportunities or touches, like that's just the reality. Chuba Hubbard isn't a premier running back in the league, but he is premier in terms of snap share and opportunity. He ranked top 4 in both of those metrics last season. And honestly, guys, like, why would that stop? Really, why would that stop? If he was producing, if he was efficient, if he was, I mean, close to top 12 in most of these metrics that I mentioned, what merits this ceasing to continue when you bring in a guy like Rico Dowdle? That's a question that I have for you guys, and would love for you to let me know in the comments. But I mean, at price right now, Chuba Hubbard going at RB 4-5 turn. Yep. RB 17 overall. I mean, I think he would definitely return on investment there if you take him.
Yeah, he's a nice later round running back when really there aren't a ton of running backs in that range. There's a lot of risk in that range, a lot of age, things like that. And I think Chuba stands out there in terms of a guy that really could just repeat what he did last year.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Bucky. Let's look at Bucky and Rachaad White last year. And, people are like, oh, does Rachaad White matter? Does he not matter? Let's look at weeks 1 through 11. Rachaad White mattered. He was the running back 23 in that time span, and in a points per game standpoint was also the running back 23, 13.9 points per game to Bucky's 11.6. But when you're looking at how the snaps were actually divvied out during weeks 1 through 11, snap share was 63-41 Rachaad White. Bucky actually had more rushing attempts, though, in the first half of the season, more rushing yards, and much higher yards per carry and rush attempts inside the 5, while Rachaad White had more targets. Rachaad White was 4th in the NFL in targets in weeks 1 through 11 among running backs, and 6th in that time span for receiving yards as well. And then, Bucky Irving typically on a per-game basis had about 2 more yards than Rachaad White, so it was a pretty even split. But typically you saw a higher snap share for White, higher receiving usage for White. Now let's go to weeks 12 through 18. You'll see in the side-by-side here that Bucky pretty much takes every single category here.
Everything.
Takes everything, right? Because he started scoring more points. 18 points per game, 18.3 for Bucky Irving in that time span. That was good enough to finish as 10th in the NFL on a points per game standpoint, and 10th overall in terms of total points as well. Looking at snap share, it's 50-49 there. And this is what I want to point out to you. Bucky Irving with a 50-50 split was already a top 10 running back, okay? In terms of rushing attempts, only 13th in the league, and only 33rd in snap share. But 7th in rushing yards, 15th in yards per carry. In terms of targets, 24th to Rachaad White's 36. He out-targeted Rachaad White in this time span as well. More receiving yards than Rachaad White, more touchdowns than Rachaad White, more total yards than Rachaad White. Clearly, this was a tale of two halves here, right? In the later half of the season, Bucky Irving completely took over that backfield from Rachaad White, got every valuable touch, including targets, and became the running back 1 there. This is not hard to figure out. And so, looking at the entire season, from an opportunity share standpoint, from a snap share standpoint, 37th in the league in snap share, 34th in opportunity share, 20th in weighted opportunities, while being 10th in team run plays per game. Yet besides being 34th and 37th in those two metrics that I mentioned, 10th in rushing yards, 9th in receiving yards last year. Again, we talk about Rachaad White and we're like, yeah, they're going to use him probably as a receiving guy. Bucky was a top 10 receiving back last year on a yards basis. And receptions. He had 47 receptions, 3 per game. That's 10th in the NFL. All while being, 19th in fantasy points per game. Now, we need to ask ourselves, okay, why did that happen? Part of that was because he only had 8 total touchdowns last year, which was 18th in the league. But if we know anything about touchdowns, they're volatile. And if Bucky continues to get the usage that he got last year, or even increase that usage, which I don't think is outside the realm of possibilities, I think it's pretty easy to see Bucky Irving taking a step up this year. Because when you're looking at his efficiency, his per touch or per carry metrics, Off the charts. True yards per carry, 4.9, 6th in the NFL. Yards per touch, 6th, 5th in the NFL. Juke rate, 3rd. Evaded tackles, 5th in the NFL. Explosive rating, 6th in the NFL. Breakaway runs, 7th in the NFL. Yards created, 4th. Yards created per touch, 2nd. Production premium. I mean, every single one of these efficiency metrics. This is over the course of the entire season where Bucky was a rookie and he didn't even have the backfield at first. And he still was top 5 in every single efficiency metric. So what does this tell you? A guy is 37th in snap share, 18th in touchdowns, was a top 10 running back. If that opportunity share, that snap share goes up even a little bit and he scores more touchdowns, Bucky Irving has easily top 6 running back upside this year. It's a great offense. We talk about buying into offenses, and that's obviously important. The Buccaneers have a fantastic offense. Now, obviously, one thing that you do have to kind of look at for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is how many touchdowns Baker Mayfield's going to throw, because that's a lot of it. They have a lot of receivers. They have 4 capable red zone receivers, and May could score touchdowns at any time. But when you're looking at overall, from a running perspective, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the 8th highest run grade offense, according to PFF. And overall offense, they were at 7th. Again, by players in good offenses. This is a good running back and a good rushing offense that did well on very little opportunity with very little touchdowns. That's almost as safe a pick as you can get. I think Bucky is a fantastic pick. I have just single-handedly in 2-3 minutes kind of convinced myself that I actually don't mind picking him this year at all.
No, not at price. It's not bad.
Again, it's like
he's a low end running back.
It's like she took off the glasses, and I'm like, oh,
he's not a bad pick in fantasy at all this season.
Well, he's going in the 2nd, and so I mean, again, pair him with a wide receiver. I think it's great. There's a lot of good 2nd round running backs this year. Next
round. Look, I'm just going to come out right away and say that RJ Harvey's floor is pretty low. Like, I totally admit that. I totally understand that. You cannot deny the upside and the ceiling that he has in a Sean Payton offense, in an offense that actually has an established run blocking game. They have an established offensive line that can really help a running back be productive, that shows any semblance of talent and opportunity. RJ Harvey is going to be running behind an offensive line that ranked 11th, top 12 in run blocking last season, according to PFF. And again, same thing that I did with Pete Carroll, with Sean Payton over with the Saints from 2017 to 2021 while Alvin Kamara was there. They ranked 13th, 5th, 17th, 5th, and 14th in total attempts. And then in Denver, they've ranked 18th and 13th. So like top half of the league consistently. And then you had some games where they were top 5, or some season where they were top 5 in total attempts. This is an offense where Sean Payton loves to run the ball, and he loves to give opportunities to his running backs. And when you saw last year in 2024, being 13th in the league with Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin and Javonte Williams as your running backs, I mean, talk about being desperate for running back talent, and you're still trying to run the ball that much. No wonder they went out, and no wonder Sean Payton went out of his way in the NFL draft this season and took a running back day 2. Now, RJ Harvey was a surprise, admittedly, but when you look at his skill set, it makes a little bit more sense when it comes to the way that Sean Payton operates his backfields consistently. The rushing metrics were solid the last 2 years, 23 and 24 with UCF for RJ Harvey. He had 14 and 1,500 rushing yards respectively, wildly efficient, over 6 yards per carry. Both, he almost got 7 yards per carry in 2024. He's an older prospect, 24 years old actually, which is why he was a surprise day 2 pick. But look at his receiving efficiency, 12.5 yards per reception in 2023, 13.4 yards per reception in 2024. This is Sean Payton's next Alvin Kamara. That's what he wants him to be. And no, I'm not saying that RJ Harvey is going to be Alvin Kamara and come out as a rookie and be, like a top 6 running back. I'm not saying that's guaranteed to happen. But why else do you think that Sean Payton went out of his way to go draft RJ Harvey and then go sign J.K. Dobbins in free agency? J.K. Dobbins is why that's why everyone's afraid of RJ Harvey this year, because everyone's afraid that J.K. Dobbins is going to get a ton of opportunity. And admittedly, that's fair. I mean, he had 15 points per game last season in the Chargers offense, where they like to run the ball quite often. And based on history, I mean, you've seen even backfield splits. Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara from 2017 to 2018, look at those rushing splits. Kamara as a rookie had 120 carries. Ingram had 230 as a veteran experienced presence there. And then you look at 2018, 194 carries for Kamara, 138 for Ingram, who missed like 4 games that year. Look at the difference, though. Look at the difference. Alvin Kamara, 100 targets and 105 targets, respectively, in 2017 and 2018. If RJ Harvey explodes this season, it will be because of what he does in the receiving game. J.K. Dobbins will get his own. Oh, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned that if and when J.K. Dobbins does get his own, he'll get hurt. That's something that Mark Ingram didn't really have going for him in New Orleans, is that he actually stayed relatively healthy consistently. J.K. Dobbins is certified injury prone. That is a fact. And when that happens, RJ Harvey will get most, if not all, of the opportunities when they're playing together on the field. And yes, technically splitting a backfield, the guy who's getting the relevant high upside opportunities will be RJ Harvey, because that quite literally is his skill set, guys. Sean Payton is trying to do the Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram thing all over again. And if it works out in a good offense where Bo Nix is slinging it right now, RJ Harvey could quite literally break fantasy football this year.
All right. You mentioned this guy a couple times, so let's talk about him real quick, because people are... where's Alvin Kamara's where's his ADP this year? He in the 4th round. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So realistically, here's the guy that's going in the 4th round compared to Jahmyr Gibbs, weeks 1 through 14, which is pre-injury for Alvin Kamara. On a fantasy points per game perspective, Alvin Kamara won. Total points, Alvin Kamara won. Snap share, Alvin Kamara actually won. Rushing attempts, Alvin Kamara won. Gibbs had him in rushing yards, yards per carry, and rush attempts inside the 5. Targets and receiving yards. Alvin Kamara was the best, the number 1 receiving back in the league, number 1 among all running backs in the NFL before he got hurt last year, weeks 1 through 14. 6.5 targets per game, 37 receiving yards per game, 110 total yards per game, 4th in the NFL. In every metric that we want to see. Because, again, this is a guy that's the opposite of Derrick Henry. Even though when you're looking at yards per carry, he's 37th in the NFL. Even though when you're looking at rushing yards, he's 10th in the NFL, not top 5. He's the best receiving back in the NFL. He is the highest volume receiving back in the NFL. He's the most efficient receiving back in the NFL. And where's he going? I mean, I could read you Alvin Kamara, who is old and washed, and everybody's predicting a fall off for Alvin Kamara this year. Guys, we could sit here and predict injury and an old guy. He has. Yes. But again, we knew this was coming earlier in Alvin Kamara's career, because when we saw the type of back he was, we knew this was a longer-lasting type of back. A receiving back is going to last longer. Yet, last year, we still don't remember. 1st in target share, 6th in routes run, 2nd in route participation last year in terms of efficiency, 9th in yards created last year. And again, the yards per carry, he's playing behind a bad offensive line. So, we can make excuses all day, but in terms of, his production, he's getting it from receiving, and his receiving metrics are amazing. They are incredible. 2nd in receiving yards last year, like I mentioned, 2nd in receptions. He was only 18th in touchdowns last year. Yet on a points per game perspective, he was 5th in the NFL last year, 19 points per game. He's going in the 4th round. And again, we know obviously the situation in New Orleans isn't great. Tyler Shuck's going to be the starting quarterback for the Saints. They officially signed him to a rookie deal.
It hasn't been great for years.
It's not been great. Derek Carr was not good. This is still not good, but what changed? We went from a not good situation to a not good situation. Okay. We got a rookie quarterback who's going to hopefully throw a lot of dump downs. He's a more mature, he's an older prospect. I think he will throw dump downs. I think they're going to use Alvin Kamara plenty. Mm-hmm. The other thing is they're still invested in Alvin Kamara, right? Heavily invested. They can't move on for the next 2 years from Alvin Kamara. And the dude is also, at this point, he's an all-time saint. He's beloved by the fan base, from what I understand. Saints fans, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I would think he is. There's literally no reason that he wouldn't show up this year. So, Alvin Kamara, I think he's a great value in the 4th round. So there you go. Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you're subscribed if you did enjoy the content. Those 2 things really help us out and they support the channel. Trying to get to 50K, we might get matching tattoos. Nathan's getting a little bit flaky on the tattoo thing, so we'll see how it goes.
I never signed up for
this. Yeah, well, he says that, but I signed him up for it. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.